All right, guys, episode 2. I got my Team Quest hoodie on. We're going to talk about origin story of how I got into jiu-jitsu. And as we go through this, I hope you enjoy the stories. I realize getting ready for this, oh man, I'm going to sound like an old head. I'm going to sound like one of those old guys, like back in the day. But then I thought about it a little more like, no, it's good. It's good to know your lineage, your heritage. It's good to understand the roots of MMA, NHB, Vale Tudo, and can keep the budo, keep the warrior mentality, the combat aspect to jiu-jitsu, especially Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I'm not going to make any apologies. Take your vitamins. No, this is going to be better than a Peloton. So buckle in. I hope you enjoy story time. So real quick, uh, uh, started in Goju Karate when I was 7, and then eventually older connected with Kenpo Karate uh, and Northwest Kenpo Karate for Christ. Shout out to Sensei Jeff Lopez and all my friends. Uh, and Kenpo Karate has roots in Hawaii, um, similar to Kaju Kempo, which is a mixed martial art blending different martial arts. And so back then, it part of karate, Kenpo karate, is like learning self-defense techniques per each belt level. So I was very interested in realistic self-defense. My daughter was young, um, and the also interested in Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee and his philosophy. Reading the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Always have wanted approached martial arts as a science, and I'm a biology major back then, and so just interested in anatomy and um, practical techniques, realistic self-defense. And partly is grown up watching boxing, in the 70s, watching Muhammad Ali coming up, and in the 80s, all the great lightweights and middleweights, and then eventually Tyson. So I've always been interested in combat sports, and so uh, I eventually got my black belt in Kempo, and started a karate club at our church, Central Bible Church, which is locally known for skate church. And so my mentor, student advisor, uh, Paul Anderson, he helped me out with the karate ministry back then for families, and so that was a lot of fun. But we, one of the students, uh, changed my life. He brought a VHS to class, and it was the UFC New Year Special 1 through 4. UFC 1 through 4, guys. We're approaching 300. Imagine 1 through 4. Have you watched them? You should watch them if you haven't. You might have heard the stories about Hoist. Go back and watch it. It's the evolution. But back then, guys, it was style versus style. Um, and the ESPN, they did a good documentary about the first UFC. So listen to that podcast. Um, but Horion was trying to make a name for jiu-jitsu, the Gracies, Hickson, um, and back then, uh, it it was style versus style, and there wasn't 20-30 years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts and wrestling being shown to be like extremely effective for fighting and for self-defense. Uh, but the very first match is Pat Smith running across the ring and grounding the ninja Scott Morris and smashing his face with elbows and busting his head open. I was like, we don't have a technique for that in Kenpo, defending that. And so, I had wrestled in 7th grade, and so I had a bias towards grappling, and watching Hoist take out the big guys, take out Chemo, and then of course the Kenpo side of me, like all our hopes were on back then Keith Hackney representing Kenpo. He was going to show the world. And he gave Hoyce a good fight. He was like 40 pounds heavier and athletic, but of course he got armbar too. So that was kind of a crossroads for traditional martial arts and or some Kenpo people. Is, do we double down and like downplay grappling and and talk about how unrealistic it is, gouge the eyes, hit, groin strike. Keith Hackney did the groin strikes against Joe Son, right? Or do you embrace the evolution that's coming? And I was one of the guys that like, this is the future. Was it Say Anything, kickboxing sport of the future? Back then, jiu-jitsu was the sport of the future, guys. It wasn't ubiquitous. It wasn't everywhere. There wasn't jiu-jitsu everywhere in Portland or in Oregon. There were, I don't know if there was a traditional jiu-jitsu academy back then. All I was familiar with was Straight Blast Gym. So back in the day, for jiu-jitsu guys, no BJJ fanatics, no YouTube guys. We'd have to wait each month for Black Belt Magazine or Kung Fu Illustrated to come out with an article about interviewing somebody from Brazil. And they would show like 2 or 3 techniques, and escape from mount or armbar, and I'd eat that up. I'd wait for, and then eventually there was a grappling magazine that came out. Besides magazines, guys, the Victory Publishing. So I remember going to the library and getting Henzo and John Danaher's book on jiu-jitsu, and I wish I had bought a copy and had it in my collection. I eventually got Solo's and some others, but like Anderson Silva's book, Randy Couture's book from Victory Publishing, those were the sources of jiu-jitsu. There were no black belts in Oregon back then, and back then it was like rare that someone had a purple belt, much less brown black, like 30 years ago. I remember, so Submission Underground, pre-Reddit. I somehow heard about that website to order the Fighter's Notebook. One of the best Christmas presents I ever got from my father-in-law is the Fighter's Notebook. Is this massive binder of jiu-jitsu and judo and mixed martial arts techniques. And so Submission Underground, learning about jiu-jitsu from the Straight Blast forum, Roy Harris, very helpful online. And then, but in these magazines, guys, they would have advertisements. It was like the Daily Deal on BJJ Fanatics. Straight Blast Gym, Functional Jeet Kune Do. They had the VHS tapes for the Dirty Dozen, the original non-Brazilian black belts. I don't think it's just America. I think some of them are from Australia or South Africa, but they would have instructionals. But back then, like, I can't afford jiu-jitsu instructionals. You see this every week or every month in the magazines. The first jiu-jitsu instructional series I got was on VHS. Pedro Carvalho. I had heard about it on there's a website, guys, BJJ, I think .org, that would rank instructionals, and there were only about like 12 or 15, maybe 20, and it would be ranked cost per move. It would rank by quality of instruction, but it was like, here's divvy up the 12 or 20 techniques, and then this is the cost of the VHS, and you get your bang for your buck, like Henzo A through Z instructional was like, the one to get. And then in the magazines, Panther videos, guys. Do you guys remember Panther videos? That was like the instructionals for karate and aikido and how Polynesian, like gouging and flesh tearing and biting. There was an instructor who was doing that. Um, there was a lucha libre instructionals on there, but Panther videos. Joe Moera was one instructional that I got back then. Roy Harris's instructor, and then eventually, Roy Harris's instructionals. Roy, besides his forum, is always generous with his knowledge. Um, but he was one of the first guys to do online video. Maybe late '90s, maybe '97, down there in San Diego, um, and he uh, it back then, guys, it was like text. You try to learn jujitsu through text because there's no high speed internet. Oh my goodness, this sounds um so dated. But this is what we're doing, guys. Back then is like if you wanted to learn how to fight, uh, learn jujitsu, learn jeet kune do. Um, so uh, so I was on the forums, and then I heard about the first seminar that I went to. I went with some of the guys from my Kenpo club. We went to Randy Kocher's grappling seminar at Choi's Taekwondo school here in town, and there was there was only about 8-10 people there, guys. Um, First technique I learned, or submission I learned, off the double leg lace, step over for the knee bar. It's kind of like a Texas cloverleaf. So the first submission I learned, um, not from video or from a magazine, uh, was from Randy, a knee bar. And um, he told us that he was getting ready to open a gym here in Oregon. He was visiting. So fast forward maybe 6-8 months later, I'm walking downtown Gresham between the library and Cafe Delirium, that street that used to have the farmers market, and I see Performance Quest Gym. I tell my wife, that's the gym that Randy's opening. So I sign up, and my first week, guys, uh, very first class, Greg Piper, my coach. I'll do an episode more about him. Underhook, check the bicep, check the wrist, the whole pummel over under, get the angle, get the head position, and get the underhook, and prevent them swimming out or overhooking you. And then checking and striking and then checking the bicep and wrist and controlling and driving with the head and the angle, the whole class. And then off to the side, it's Jeff Monson and Chael Sonnen training, rolling. I didn't know who Jeff Monson was. Uh, he was huge, but then I saw that Chael was doing fine against him, and Chael was super young back then. And that was cool. And I think Monson was getting ready for ADCC. Um, and so that was first class. Second class, Dan Henderson. There's like 3 of us there. It was a private lesson with Dan Henderson, showing us his textbook front headlock. And so from the start, guys, underhook and front headlock are like hardwired into my body. Uh, using the shoulder on the back of the neck, elbow pinch, and so that was a lot of fun. Third class, uh, the front door's locked, so we have to climb up to the top and break into the roof. It's snowing. Randy Kocher's arm is like wrapped up. He had just returned from Japan and got armbarred. I I forget against his opponent. I think it's TK, but he eventually came to train at Team Quest. No, maybe it was Ensign. I forgot to say, forgive any mistakes, guys. This is off the top of the head. I'm not researching this, so if I get any details wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments, or tell me how you remember it, or come on and let me interview you about the good old days. So get down in there. It's with the Centennial High School wrestling team. third class. Um, the dads were watching their sons, and eventually, this is like 2.5 hour practice, maybe two. Um, they're watching me drag myself off the mat after certain drills, and they're just like shaking their heads, like, "Why are you doing this to yourself, man?" This is when I was 30. Um, I loved it. Um, that my neck was so sore. I remember from the front headlock from the wrestling, uh, and I was lighter back then, guys. I was small. Um, I lost 11 pounds that first week, and I knew I was in the right place. I was like loving it. It was so fun, so cool. Randy's a really good technical coach. He he really breaks down, like, he's got so many years of experience wrestling, teaching, wrestling, coaching wrestling. Um, so that was fun. Um, uh, Eventually, uh, Kevin Keeney, a wrestling coach and promoter, and Chael Sonnen, they put together the Full Contact Fighting Federation and Rumble at the Roseland. So about a year after starting, uh, I signed up for that, and it had just officially been MMA just been sanctioned uh, uh, to again to have events, and so signed up for the first Rumble at the Roseland, and the I'm going to do a separate episode about that. Um, what to say? Oh, Straight Blast Gym. So, Greg Piper was a student of Matt Thornton, um, and eventually he was my first coach, and they just had like a couple classes to the public. My friend Jacob Lamb, who I met on Submission Underground, one of my best friends now. Um, Back in the day, I was curious. I learned, uh, um, Team Quest, and uh, that's how I heard. So I walked by the gym, and then I also asked questions from Jacob about the details of it, and he was like student number two, um, one or two, and so like that was fun to know someone before visiting, and kind of get into it. Back then, guys, it was guys fighting and getting ready for pride fights. Dan Henderson would fly up and you know spar with Matt Linlin and Randy, and a handful of guys. Uh, Curtis Crawford eventually became the striking coach. Back in the day, Evan Tanner eventually came to live up here and train. But Greg Piper, Rob Follis, Rob came over from Straight Blast Gym. It was mainly just a like guys, pro fighters who would train like a couple times a day. But when Rob came, he formed it into a gym, made it more of a business, and great coach, a good businessman. And so, I'm going to say more about Rob and uh, how what we learned from him. So, Performance Quest downtown Gresham. Eventually, we moved to behind USA Auto Wholesale. It was a used car dealership co-owned by Matt Linlin, and I was there the first week, the first night. There was the tin corrugated tin, the sliding glass, big sliding door. Um, Second class, the white wall was up. Third class, all the white wall had holes in them because Randy was throwing people into the walls. Uh, so nowadays, you put mats on the walls. Um, but back then we didn't know that. I learned quick how to open gyms. Uh, it was a lot of fun. So how to apply this? How does this apply to jujitsu today? I think I want to make it practical for you. Is uh, One, it's helpful to understand like how your instructor learned his jujitsu, and to understand your lineage and how the skill, or the knowledge and the skill and techniques and uh, um, get passed down. right? Because jujitsu is evolving. Um, but but my bias is to uh, to learn to keep the combative aspects to it, um, at least a little bit of it. Um, so if you haven't learn, everybody has their reasons for learning jujitsu. Um, but if you want to be stronger, if you want to be a better grappler, if you want to be, um, y- it helps, I think, to have the confidence and be able to handle yourself and know what to do, know how to defend against common street attacks, learn how to defend against a haymaker, and punches and pushes and shoves and grabs, um, and put the mouthpiece on, like put some small gloves on and boxing gloves on, and learn how to defend against a headbutt. If you and your coach may not uh have like taught you this formally in class, but they probably, if they're a black belt, they probably know these techniques. Um, so maybe ask them to learn some of that after class, or get a private lesson. Um, because are you gonna be competing in mixed martial arts and boxing, kickboxing? Are you gonna be like defending yourself on the street? Probably not, depending on where you are and what you do outside of class. Um, but it helps to have that confidence to know that you could handle yourself. Um, so uh, I hope you enjoyed that episode, guys. Uh, I could talk for 3-4 hours. There's so much to say. Just again, grateful for all my instructors, um, and coaches and teammates and people I've trained with. Uh, and uh, Give me feedback in the comments, guys. What things you might be interested in hearing about. Um, I'm gonna talk a little bit about, I trained at Nemesis, just because of family stuff. My son being in music theater, spending 6 days a week downtown. So like back. So it's amazing. Imagine Portland judo scene or Oregon judo scene, um, without American Top Team or Impact or Five Rings and or 10th Planet, or Brazilian Top Team. Uh, so uh, I'm grateful for the art, and the positive aspects in my life. I hope you are too. And please like, share, subscribe, rate, um, and give me feedback. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, guys. And I hope this is going to be a good year for you with jujitsu and your training. If you're thinking about training, uh, I'm gonna have some episodes for like getting ready to start, or for white belts eventually too. All right, guys. Until next time. Us.